I'm not gonna lie to you guys, it was a little bit sad. I was I was almost brought to tears because, I was born and raised in the United States. Of my When I was born, the first president I remember, I was born in '88, but the first president I remember is actually Bill Clinton. And since then, it's been disappointment after disappointment after disappointment, right? I feel like somebody actually put it very well today on another show that I was on, where he said it feels like everybody's doing, it's like a social media contest to be the best influencer, and everybody's just really bad. That's basically what it's felt like for most presidents. I can say pretty confidently that most presidents that I've experienced, they're not that smart. I'd say most of my friends are smarter than most of the presidents that we've had. And yet, watching Putin made me feel like, Jesus Christ, this is what it actually feels like to have a smart president. Oh, Sabby's here early. Boy, that's 2 black people in a week that got here early. What's going on, Sab?
What's up, Niko?
Nothing much, man. I was just giving my quick breakdown of the interview. Did you get a chance to watch it yet?
Yeah, I finally finished all of it this morning. So I started it yesterday. I got through maybe the first 30 minutes where he was talking about the history. Like, he talked about the history for like 30 minutes. And then I
Yeah.
finished the rest of it this morning. So I'll talk about it later tonight.
What was your takeaway from it? What was your impression of the interview itself and then the way it was conducted by Tucker?
It's really interesting. I just saw TYT actually covered this and they titled it as Tucker Carlson coddles Putin, which is really funny because I felt like Putin was taking some jabs there at Tucker Carlson like throughout the interview.
Couple. If he didn't feel the first one, the first CIA call out, he definitely should have felt the second one.
Yeah. So he was taking a couple of jabs, but I found it to be pretty interesting listening to the history of Ukraine and things like that. I'll get more into that tonight, but I think that one of the things that Putin did discuss is the idea that obviously the president is not really the one that's controlling the country. So that wasn't a surprise to me or you and a lot of other people. We've been saying that for a long time. But now you have another world leader on record saying that. What was interesting, though, is when he mentioned that under Bill Clinton's presidency, he actually asked to join NATO. So
Yeah.
I did not know about that.
I didn't know. Yeah, I didn't know about that either. And he was like very clear, like, no, I was dead serious about it. Like, because it seems like Putin is very judicious, right? He seems to have he tries to take every single diplomatic avenue that he can before he allows the situation to escalate. And my assumption is because he's of that same mindset of most Russians, like they know what it's like to fight war and they know what it's like to die in them. And if they can de-escalate, he will. And for him to try to join NATO, despite the fact that it's pretty well established that NATO was specifically created to crush Russia, that shows that the lengths he was willing to go to try and preserve peace. It also shows how humble he is, right? That he's not governing with his ego, but instead he's governing on for the best of the international community and specifically the interests of the Russian people.
Yeah, I mean, it was very telling, I think, and I said before, it's important that we hear the other side in reference to war. Like, for example, like Zelensky has been on every major outlet since the war began, but we never really saw a journalist from the West after the war sit down and get Russia's side. We didn't see that. Same thing in reference to Israel and Gaza, right? Like Netanyahu and his advisors are on every major outlet. Are these people going into Gaza and actually talking to those people? Like, that's the thing. So imagine if we would have heard the other side in reference to Saddam Hussein having weapons of mass destruction.
Yeah. And it was crazy. We didn't even need to hear the other side before people were already privy to what was going on there. So imagine really if he could say, this is the real reason why they're trying to take us down.
Yep.
There are a lot of stuff that the world doesn't even understand about the war in Iraq that we're still finding out about right now, that perhaps if Saddam was given that fair interview to explain his side, Saddam was given an interview before, but I believe that was right after the Persian Gulf War, not before the Iraq War. I gotta say, I gotta give Tucker credit because he actually pushed back more than what I expected him to be completely honest. I thought he was just going to let Putin cook and, just kind of move on through the interview. But he stopped him to ask him how points are relevant. He even made comparisons and contrasts, effectively saying, like, how would, so would it be okay if Hungary, was it Hungary, he said? If Hungary or Poland tried to take X, Y, and Z back in the same way you're doing it, et cetera, et cetera. So he didn't just let Putin talk, justify his actions, and not challenge him on the logic. And so I don't really feel like it was a softball interview. I feel like it was, it was definitely more challenging than any interview we've seen for Zelensky in the West, I would say.
Right. I think so too. And I was surprised he pushed back as much as he did as well. But also too, that issue that you just brought up about taking back land. Remember, this is the same claim that Israel makes. Israel uses that same rhetoric. And that's something I'm going to dive into a little bit more tonight, because I want people to understand, you can't say it's not okay for Israel and say it is okay for Russia to do that. So we will see where people really stand when it comes to taking back land, et cetera. But that's the claim that Israel makes based on biblical texts, is that historically the land belongs to them.
Yeah, but at least Russia actually has, which is funny because like this, you saw when he pulled out the documents. Here, man, you want some documents? I got all the documents right here.
Yeah,
so this man literally gave him a book of receipts.
I know. I was surprised. I was like, what is happening here? But I was surprised the interview was actually 2 hours. I was predicting maybe 1 hour, but considering he talked about the history for the first 30 minutes, and the question was, why did you decide to invade Ukraine?
Sabby, you know what that shows me, though? What it shows me is that there is not a single decision that Putin makes for Russia or for the international community within the context of his presidency that is outside of historical context. He understands how he got here, how the country got here, and how the international community arrived at this situation. Whatever the situation may be, whatever decision he makes contemporarily is taking into account history. And I mean, can we say that about any president? Usually it's they run the country kind of like how a CEO runs a company for their shareholders. It's about the next quarter. It's not accounting for history.
Right. And I'm wondering if I haven't checked TikTok yet, but I'm going to today, because I'm wondering if people are talking about it on TikTok.
Oh, I'm sure. It was, so they were trying. I find it really interesting that this special investigation dropped, like the results of the special investigation in Biden and Hunter Biden dropped last night on a Thursday, right? And right before the Tucker interview dropped. Like, why didn't y'all drop this in the middle of the day? And so instead of Tucker being the number one trending topic for politics, it was Joe Biden, special counselor, Hunter Biden, and then Kamala for some reason. Probably because of the he's too old and he can't remember shit line in the investigation. But do you feel like that was a coincidence, or do you feel like that was probably done on purpose?
I think that was done on purpose. But Tucker Carlson, at least on Twitter, I'll have to check the other platforms, but on Twitter, before I went live last night, he had over 40 million views of that interview. So I have to go back and check and see how many views it has now.
Probably close to 100 million. I would say probably. I haven't checked yet, but it's probably close to 100 million. Which, by the way, I don't know if y'all know how these ratings work, y'all. Ain't no show in mainstream media at all right now. And the closest would have been Tucker on Fox News, but there's no show in mainstream media getting close to that for any interview. Like, and I think you'd be lucky if the State of the Union gets 100 million views.
Right. I think mainstream media, because they were attacking Tucker Carlson before the interview even happened. So I think there may be some jealousy there that he was the one that was able to go over there and get that interview. And now the EU is actually considering putting sanctions on him for going to Russia to do that interview. It's wild.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They're literally saying they were threatening this before they heard the interview. That was what was wild to me. I'm like, y'all are literally sanctioning this man before y'all even hear the interview. So you're punishing him for being a journalist, right? Yep. And there's so much precedence of not just any journalist, but specifically liberal journalists. Like whenever Larry King was working for CNN and he interviewed Gaddafi, actually. Right. So there's plenty of historical context where journalists interviewed people that the United States considered adversarial. But in this particular case, maybe you can make the argument that, yeah, well, it was because they were working for mainstream media and so at the end of the day, they control the interview. The mainstream could edit the interview however they would choose to, but Tucker made assurances in advance that nothing would be edited as far as, unless it's for just quick cuts and stuff like that, but nothing would be edited out, which in my opinion, I'm sure you would agree, that's how you're supposed to do journalism. You let them talk and you let people, you believe that people are smart enough to discern what is true, what's not true, and obviously let them do their research where necessary.
Right. I mean, Barbara Walters did those types of interviews back in the day, and she was praised for talking to other world leaders. So I think that's the thing, is that it wasn't controlled by mainstream media. And you're right. They would have found ways to edit that interview. I don't think it would have been 2 hours long either.
No, they wouldn't. They damn sure would let him give the history lesson that he gave, because that history lesson was pretty huge. Yeah. And he also somehow managed to do it without actually attacking anybody. That dude is he's smart. He's a smart dude. He has this way about him where, see, if I was in his position, bro, I'd be pissed. I would have a grudge against the entirety of the West, and deservedly so. But he has this thing where he's like, look, man, I'm not gonna what do you say? I'm not gonna assume why this person did this. I'm not gonna assume why they allowed this to happen. I'm not gonna assume their intentions. Where we know damn well what the intentions were of most of these people, including the Russian leaders he was talking about, including the Bolshevik Revolution. Like, all this information, this documentation, we know he knows exists. But his goal is to show you, when I'm making decisions for Russia, or when I'm making decisions when it comes to our position in the international community, I'm not doing it from a place of malice. It's all from logic and from the facts that we have available, and with the intent of moving forward. What about that missile? Did you see the part about the missile defense system that he tried to collaborate on?
Yep. It's all coming out now.
Yeah. And he said that they were interested in it. They were surprised that he was interested to do it, but it was like, yeah, we'll consider it. And then Bush, I believe it was Bush who went back, and then his puppet masters told him, no, it's not happening. And so he made several references to the fact, like you said, yeah, the U.S. government the president doesn't control shit. And he showed different examples to let you all also like come to that conclusion. And when he was like, they were like, when's the last time you talked to Biden? He was like, I don't know.
Yep.
You know how insulting that is?
And remember when Obama was president and when Trump was president, how many times did we see video footage of Obama meeting with Putin and Trump meeting with Putin? And then when it comes to Biden, it's just like.
But I think that's indicative of the fact that he's like trying to tell us, like, the way he was saying it, right? It was very flippant. Like, I can't remember because I just, he was like, no, I don't remember. I mean, with a lot of people, people I've talked to, like, in this way of, yeah, he's not important.
Yep.
Because he's not the one making decisions. I could meet with him but what would that even mean? Because of what he said. Your president doesn't run your country. The CIA, he mentioned several times the CIA did, and talked about the Nord Stream pipeline, that situation. Talked about the fact that Germany, against its own interests, is not opening up its gas resource, natural gas resource to the rest of Europe, despite the fact that they're claiming, obviously, because Russia cut them off, they need the natural gas. It's like they could alleviate the circumstances, but the U.S. wants so badly for Europeans to suffer so they will be okay with the war in Ukraine that Germany is literally losing money, hemorrhaging money, just to achieve this goal. So it let me know a lot about, I mean, I learned stuff about Russia and the U.S. I didn't even know about. So there's that. But it really let me know a lot more about Putin.
Yeah, and hopefully it turns more people away from the war machine. Hopefully, after seeing that interview and just being like, I hope so. I hope so, because I hope people watch that interview and they sit back and say, so basically, the U.S. and NATO provoked this entire thing. And I hope they see it for what it really is.
What do you think about his focus on denazification specifically?
Yeah. So I'm glad they actually got to that talking point in the interview. I didn't know if they would, but I'm glad that they did, because how many times did we hear, Niko, over the past year and a half, people say, stop saying there's Nazis in Ukraine. AOC said there are no Nazis in Ukraine, right? So how many politicians did Max Blumenthal confront in person and ask them about the Nazis in Ukraine? And they all said there are no Nazis in Ukraine. Well, we all knew a lot of us that do this. We all knew that that was a lie. I actually knew that was a lie because one of my former students was from Ukraine, and they brought that up to me before. They brought that up to me. Yes. They said, this is before the war. They said that coming to the United States, they came from school, obviously, but coming from the United States, they actually had never even met a Black person before. And they went on to say why. And they talked about the Nazification in Ukraine. My former student told me about
different context. So in a totally different context. Wow.
Yeah, because they were explaining that it was a culture shock for them coming to the United States, because she was like, back home, people don't look like this. And you definitely don't see Black people in like leadership positions or anything like that. So they were just like talking about how diverse the United States was, and they just weren't used to that coming from back. The thing I think that people need to realize is, like, when you go to Europe, so I grew up in parts of Germany. When you go to Europe, as you move further away from Germany and Spain and France, and you move closer towards like Russia, basically Eastern Europe. Those countries are not diverse. You'll see more diversity in like France and Germany and even parts of Spain, the Netherlands. Like, you'll see all different types of people. But once you move over towards like Eastern Europe, it's not that way. And so if you go to those countries, people may look at you kind of weirdly, like, because they're not used to seeing you.
Yeah.
But
it might be culturally diverse and religiously diverse, but they're kind of homogeneous.
Right. And so the Nazification in Ukraine is very much embedded in the culture. Like, in the culture, it's not just for the people who said a while back, and they said there's only a couple of soldiers that are in the Azov battalion that are, Nazis or whatever.
You can't have a couple of soldiers in a battalion.
No, it's embedded in the culture, the leaders that they look up to. That's where it comes from. So that's dangerous. We went through this before, right? Didn't we go through this before with like Hitler? So that is dangerous. And also in Poland. And this is another thing people don't realize. My former supervisor was originally from Poland. And she said, even in Poland, they have that problem. So the thing is that, have we really learned anything since the Holocaust? If you look at what Israel is doing to the Palestinian people, have we really learned from the Holocaust? I don't think we really have.
Well, look, first of all, I'm a firm believer that part of the reason that Putin is set on denazifying Ukraine is because he is actually acknowledging the problem that never went resolved, which is, after World War II, we put Nazi leaders in power in NATO, right? Like, people forget that happened. We took in Nazis in Operation Paperclip, and I always said we didn't convert anybody from being a Nazi to then working for us for Operation Paperclip. We were just bringing our employees back home. I felt like they were always working for us. When we look at the policies that happened right after and the way that the U.S. conducted itself right after, who was the Nazis' greatest enemy? It wasn't the U.S. Everybody seems to believe that, but no, the U.S. was running cover for them, including the Olympics. Like, that's a whole different thing. We started the Spanish Civil War because there was supposed to be an Olympics there. There was a whole bunch of countries that were protesting the Olympics, and the day that Olympics was supposed to start, everything went crazy there. And that was partially because of the United States. Simultaneously, we knew who Hitler was, and we knew because he was banning Jews from competing, which is, how our late, great Jesse Owens was able to compete.
Yep.
And we know that Russia was their number one enemy. They obviously, everybody knows that at this point. What was the first thing the United States did after World War II was over? Start beefing Russia and form NATO. And what was NATO's primary directive? Go after Russia. So you look at the policies just in that context, and then you look at the policies all over the world. What type of countries do we go after, and who do we kind of dehumanize? the African nations, East Asian nations, brown, black. The what's the damn rules based order is basically white Judeo-Christian nations can do what they want to and they're civilized and everyone else is not. Like, y'all think that's a coincidence? Like GE Ford, how many they sued because their Nazi subsidiaries got bombed by the U.S. government, and they sued because they said they knew what we're there and they bombed us anyway. It's like, hold up, so that means FDR signed off on this? Yup. So denazification isn't just a problem for Russia, but Russia acknowledges it probably more than anybody, especially Putin, because they're like, bro, not getting rid of Nazis like they said they did has led us to the point we're at right now, to the point where now they're on their doorstep and it's becoming a genuine problem.
And the US government likes to brag and say we defeated the Nazis in World War II. Right, but we still had segregationist policies here at home. So like think about that for a second. The Japanese internment camps, like Jim Crow laws in the South. And it's so like when you heard people like Muhammad Ali say, I am not going to go to Vietnam to fight for a country that doesn't even respect me or give me equal rights in this country. Like, this is very, it paints a bigger picture about what the United States really is. Yes, we may be a melting pot, but when you look at the grander scheme of things, we still support the same type of Zionist and racist policies that we're pointing fingers at other countries for supporting. Because let's go back to 2018. There was a letter that was signed by a number of House representatives that actually was calling out the concern about the Nazification in Poland and in Ukraine. And what was really interesting was after this war in Ukraine started and we started to hear about the Nazification in Ukraine, notice how all of those representatives, Ro Khanna and Hakeem Jeffries, all of them that signed onto that letter, all of a sudden, they don't know anything about Nazis in Ukraine.
Yeah, and they were saying that it was right-wing propaganda, pro-Russia propaganda. You know what is even crazier though? The fact that now, because I did not know that that Poland and Hitler had a little deal going on. I'm like, shit, that makes a lot of sense now. That makes why there are not a bunch of Nazis in Poland. And I was like, damn, I would have, because Poland to the West has always been painted as its victim, that like the Blitzkrieg was something that they could have never predicted and never expected. That's how they've always been painted to us. And now you're like, well, shit, hold up. How many, going back to Israel and Palestine, fuck, man, how many Polish people ended up in Israel after the war? Now, we know that Israel has a pretty good habit, a well-established habit of protecting its own. So if you were part of the Nazis, right, you know that remaining in Poland was a non-starter. You know that you couldn't run east to the Soviet Union at the time. That was also a non-starter. The furthest you can go is to Ukraine. But if you're Jewish, maybe that's not like the best example. But you do have motivation to pretend to be Jewish and run your ass right over to Israel, don't you? Because we always talk about they built this safe haven for all Jews. What about the Africans? Do y'all know, like, the Holocaust did not end and start and reside only and exclusively in Eastern Europe. They were out there slaughtering African Jews and even Arab and Desi Jews as well. And that never really gets talked about in Western history books. But they weren't brought by the boatloads like Eastern Europeans were. Why is that?
And they are also sterilizing Ethiopian Jewish women. And they can't say that's because of religious reasons, because those women are Jewish. But they were sterilizing them against their will, telling them that they were giving them some other type of, shot. And it was actually to sterilize those women. And this doesn't get brought up often enough when it's easy to point out Gaza and what happened to the Palestinian people. But every time you hear Netanyahu and his advisors use this phrase that Israel has a right to exist, we have a Jewish state, yada, yada. bring up what happened to the Ethiopian women who are also Jewish. That's important for people. The Guardian wrote an entire article about that. Even they covered it. And it just it's right over people's heads. I haven't heard mainstream media bring this up at all. At all.
Oh, yeah, you can't bring that up, bro. Can't bring that up. If they brought that up, it destroys everything. I bring it up all the time. I've been bringing it up for years and years. I bring it up at least 3 or 4 times a year because I'm like, y'all do know that like this whole thing with being Jewish isn't about being Jewish. It's one about being Zionist, of course, but also you got to be the right kind of Jew. Like there's always this claim, right, that Arabs were just as toxic towards Jewish people during this time as Nazis were. Then why weren't Jewish Arabs being brought by the boatload into Israel the same way Eastern Europeans were, right? Why don't we see that say, because for a long time, that Netanyahu had pretended to be Sephardic Jew, like Arabic Jew, for a long, long time. Not only is this man not Sephardic, he's Polish. But by the way, just as for some information for you guys, he's specifically Polish. His real name is what's his last name? It's Melikowski. It's Melikowski. That's his real last name. Yeah, he actually has more ties to Philadelphia than he did to Israel. So you start to wonder, like, why is it the representation always looks like the Polish people, the Scandinavian people, and never like the Arabs that were there prior to, if racism isn't an issue in Israel, right? And I mean, the best way to how does America hides its fascism behind democracy? It happens. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what they do. They will call somebody else a dictator for being elected president 15 years, 20 years at a time. What they won't tell you is that our system of only allowing 8 years is actually new, and it's extremely unique to the U.S. Almost the entirety of Latin America, it is actually a violation of their constitutions, because if you try to force 8 years, because it is, technically speaking, you're taking away the will of the people. Because the people want him for 20 years and they want him for fucking 20 years. And that's just, it is what it is. If they don't like him, they'll get rid of him. That's how voting works. That's how democracy is supposed to work. So it really makes you wonder, like, I guess I already know the answer. The answer is Nazis were never really defeated. They were just relocated. And the best way to hide behind being a Nazi would probably be what? Hiding behind your religion of being Jewish. Your religion, even though what's his name? Netanyahu admits he's not even a practicing Jew. He's a secular Jew, whatever the hell that means.
And it's not even just Benjamin Netanyahu, because the thing is, let's say he does resign, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, another leader will be installed, or elected, but it won't be someone that doesn't have the approval of the United States.
See what you did right there. Did right there.
Someone who has the approval of the United States. And if you don't remove Zionism, you're still going to have the same issue. So I've noticed, like, mainstream media, they keep saying, Netanyahu is far right wing and all this. And what do we do about Netanyahu? It's not just about Netanyahu. It's about Zionism, which they don't want to talk about that because they know, they're a part of this too. They're all part of the media, all of them. They're all a part of this. And they know what will happen if they actually start to criticize and critique Zionism.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you brought that up. Netanyahu is an easy scapegoat. They know he's wildly unpopular in his own country, amongst his own people. He's wildly unpopular here. So if you try to focus on Netanyahu, you can scapegoat him and never really have to focus on Zionism that is not limited to Israel. Like, the most embarrassing thing in the world, in my opinion, is being a Christian Zionist, because Zionists have made the argument that, like, y'all ain't shit. You got literally rabbis who justify spitting on Christians. And yet y'all out here waving the Israeli flag. Like, yeah, man, if you're a Christian, you gotta be like, bro, come on. I got a super chat for you, Sad. That somebody, it said, Niko, what are you doing talking to my girl Sabby? How could you betray?
Oh
man, I had somebody on my show. I had a whole conversation about you the other day, because somebody said that they saw that rock on your finger and they were jealous.
Oh my gosh, that's funny.
Yeah, hey, look, man, look. Hey, It's true, man. It's hard to find some smart, strong black woman out here. Sabby, you off the market now, so they gonna have to live with it. Really quick, how
Oh,
how has life on the RBN side and on the journalist side been for you, really quick, before you get up out of here? Because I've seen your growth over the last year, and it has been absolutely tremendous. We've had this conversation on and offline about the need for more black women to be represented in this particular space, and you have really, really taken off, and it's been a pleasure to see. So, for you, how's the journey been for you?
Oh man, it's been somewhat of a roller coaster a little bit, Niko. I mean, you know how it is when you're first starting out. The first year is the hardest. But I think, with those of us at RBN, one of the things that's a little bit different is like hitting the ground. Like I try to cover protests if I can. I try to go out into the community and interview just everyday people about whether it's housing issues or any other kind of issues they're dealing with in Boston or Boston
Mm-hmm.
area, whatever. I think it's just, it's also it's a little bit different when you're an activist too, and you know about this. So it's
It is.
like we were activists first, and then we decided let's try to put our activism online and combine it with like politics and all that kind of stuff in news. And so there's an added layer to what we do because we don't just have like YouTube shows. We also organize within the community. We started the RBN chapters in all of our locations. So we do mutual aid in our communities as well too. So there's an added layer to what we do. We also study theory. Like JB took an entire like Marxism course. I know with his chapter in Orlando, they also get together and they talk about like what it means to be a Marxist and how do you apply these things to the working class and the issues that we're dealing with in the United States. How do you apply it to what's happening in Gaza? Like those types of things. So we looked at what the Black Panthers did and we thought that that was actually a good model. And so
Mm-hmm.
we aspire to try to be like them. We don't claim to be them, but we try to strive to be that way and to help within the community and organizing space. And the way that you can do that is by inspiring other people. So the platform that we have, we try to educate people about the issues, about the political issues, and also about what else you can do and not just sit back and hope that a political leader is going to save you. So one of the things I
Mm.
always tell people on my show is nobody is coming to save you. We have to help
Nobody.
ourselves. And I see it every election cycle. I'm sure you do too. What all the people right now that are like, RFK, he's the one, everybody thinks that there is this political candidate that is going to be their hero. And that is never going to happen. And this is why people are they're disappointed after this person.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we saw this with Barack Obama. How many people, were excited and said, time for a change. And then there was no change, no positive
Ain't no, he
change.
meant pocket change. He meant pocket change. He ain't really mean change.
There you go. So we try to inspire people to like not put all your faith in electoral politics and look at other things that you can do in your community. And a lot also politics is local. Politics is
Mm.
local. You got to start at the local level first. If you live in ballot initiative states, try to put forth some of these ballot measures. I mean, it's worked a lot for us here in Massachusetts. So that's another thing that I focus on, the ballot measures that are happening across the country. I think a lot of people just may not pay attention to how they can
Yeah.
actually implement change on the local level.
Without needing to go through a politician, those ballot initiatives are game changers.
Yeah,
If we waited for politicians, then a lot of states wouldn't have legalized marijuana, would they?
there you go.
I mean, that's just like just a simple example. Hell, if we waited for ballot initiatives, interracial marriage wouldn't be a thing. Y'all do
There
know
you
that.
go.
People keep forgetting like the most groundbreaking policies didn't come from a politician altruistically, deciding I'm going to fight my hardest to get this passed. No, it was people who got tired of waiting for them
Yeah.
to make a decision, decided to take the power into their own hands. Sabby, I'm gonna let you get up out of here before I continue. But where can people find you at?
Yeah, you can find me on Revolutionary Blackout Network channel on YouTube. You can also find me on my channel, Sabby Sabs, and on Twitter at Sabby Sabs too.
Yeah, she frequently goes onto the Hill to shake things up. I love watching your segments on the Hill. Like it's, Robbie's always looking at like Abby on here again. God damn it, I don't know. But you do it with such class. You break it down with such class, and it's amazing to see, Sab. I'm so proud of you, and I'm so excited to see how far you come, and I can't wait to see where you go.
Oh, thank you so much, Niko.
Of course, of course. Go ahead and get up out of here. I'm gonna see you tonight. I'll be on Sabby Show tonight, guys, in case I didn't know.
Tonight, 8 p.m., guys.
8 p.m. I'll be there. Talk to you soon, Sab.
Bye.
Bye. All right, people. So I want to talk a little bit more about the show. Oh, let me get this super chat. Sparky, thanks for the super chat. One of King Solomon's best girlfriends was the queen of Sheba, now Ethiopia. That makes how Israel treated Ethiopian Jewish women even worse. Did not know that. I just learned something new today. So I wanted to continue talking about this interview with Tucker and Putin, and so I got to watch 95% of it. I actually had to jump into another interview earlier today before I could finish it. But the biggest takeaway from that interview was that, in my opinion, wasn't because once again, y'all knew that the 2014 Maidan coup happened. Everybody who watches this show and everybody who watches Tucker probably knew that already. Y'all knew that you knew the history of NATO as far as its the goal of taking down Russia. What I think that interview showed was that Putin is a competent leader. He's not a psychopath. And he's not some type of psychopathic dictator that the United States and the Western media tries to push him as. It showed that he genuinely has the interests of the Russian people in mind with every decision that he makes. And that what it really showed me as far as in the context of the war in Ukraine is, bro, I go through every single method of diplomacy, before I ever think about firing a single bullet, is what it looked like to me. I don't know if that's what it looked like to y'all. It's definitely what it looked like to me. When that's why the EU wants to sanction Russia. Or not, well, yeah, Russia, but more specifically Tucker. That is why we saw the rounds of media focusing on Tucker being a traitor for being willing to conduct an interview, instead of saying, well, let's all wait until we see the interview before we make our judgment. So you should tune in so that we can dissect this. No, it was don't watch it. Well, why not? If you know that everything will be obvious bullshit, if you believe that everything will be so, easily debunked propaganda, why are you discouraging people from watching it? Because, I feel like that would make your case stronger if you're the Western media and if you're the Western establishment, but that's not what happened, was it? It was don't watch it. They didn't want you to see Putin. Yeah, hear him, history. They didn't want you to see him. And by see him, I mean, they didn't want you to know what kind of leader he was. They didn't want you to know how he comes to his conclusions, how he makes his decisions, the context that goes behind his decision making. They didn't want you to know that he's fully aware of how involved the CIA is with every decision making, or with every decision made in the US. They didn't want you to know that he is fully aware of what happened with the Nord Stream pipeline, for example. Hell, he was aware that Tucker tried out for the CIA. He joked on him twice about it. And to be completely honest, I think there's an added layer to it. We know, especially I'm younger as far as politics is concerned. The way that Western media has portrayed Russians has been, at some level, very dehumanizing. They literally will say, it's the Russians. It's the Russians. Probably the Russian. What the hell does that even mean, bro? I mean, could you, in today's world, could you imagine anybody walking around saying it's the Jews publicly without shame, in the way that mainstream media has done with Russians over the last 10? Now, I feel like there are a lot of people who have a more humanizing outlook on Russians in general, because they're looking at Putin like, man, this dude just really cares about his country, bro. And he comes with receipts. Why is it that I can't, if we say, yo, man, Joe Biden, sit down for 2 hours, have a conversation about the history of the United States, not only within the context of itself, but in the context of the international community, to help explain to the entire world why we're making the decisions we're making today. Why is that notion laughable? Why is that? Look, guys, that notion is laughable. We know for a fact that our president cannot have a conversation about anything, let alone the historical context behind the decision-making process of the United States. And yet he is still the president of the United States. We know for a fact that he's not actually running the show, and yet people are still engaging in this electoral process as if he does. Kind of like Sabby said. Like, why are you waiting for him to come? Why are you waiting for somebody to come save you that has no power to save you? He has the power, at least aesthetically, to make shit worse. He has the power to give passes. He has the power to encourage you to look the other way. However, he does not have the power to fix anything. The next president will not have the power to fix anything. If anything, if there was some type of just president going forward, the just president would be like the job of a just president would literally just be challenging the CIA. And yet we know this. We know that it would be challenging the CIA. It would be challenging the establishment. It would be challenging the military-industrial complex. Your job would be fighting your own system. We know this, and yet we are still having people who prop this up and pretend it is not like the United States isn't a democracy, bro. It isn't a democracy. What Putin, when I say it's not a democracy, I'm saying I have zero sense that Biden, or even to some degree that even Trump might be a little bit better than Biden, but like I don't have any confidence that any leader right now is working on for the best interest of the American people, right? Bad decision or good decision. I didn't get that sense from Putin. Every decision he makes is for the benefit of the Russian people. Whenever people say America first, they think they're getting what Putin is doing, but that's not actually what's happening. If America first meant whatever the hell Putin was doing, bro, I'd be the first one on that train. I'd ride it till the wheels fall off. I would ride it till the wheels fall off. This man playing so far in it. You know, usually, guys, how often do we hear people try to justify what their favorite politician does by like making some illusion that they're playing 4D chess? I don't believe that there's a single goddamn politician in power in the US that's playing 4D chess. Really, I don't believe that about almost any politician. Because like I said earlier, politicians in the US run their respective offices like CEOs run corporations. They only think about the next quarter. They don't have the capacity to think past the next quarter or even 2 quarters ahead. They always say, oh, they're playing 4D chess. Man, you just don't know what's going on. You're just not seeing the play on the field. Trump didn't release Julian Assange because he's got some other plan going on, man. He hasn't spoke out enough and forcefully about the protesters at January 6th and how they're being wronged on behalf of Donald Trump, by the way. How they're facing prison sentences that they shouldn't be facing, how a lot of them are being held without bail and without charge. Trump isn't speaking about that because he's playing 4D chess. Nah, bro. But you know who I do believe if somebody would say, yeah, man, Putin's playing 4D chess. Yep, 100% believe it. I 100% believe it. Why? Let me give you some examples, guys. At the start of this war in Ukraine, y'all know, as well as I do, the United States, NATO, and the entirety of the West basically did what? They said, we're going to sanction him. We're going to cut off everything. We're going to ask our allies to sanction him. Okay. So they tried that. They even cut off RT, y'all. They sanctioned RT. That was a whole scandal that everybody kind of forgot about. There is no more RT America because even though RT America didn't even cover really topics in Russia, which is funny. That was probably the funniest part about them being so adamant about getting rid of RT America is specifically the fact that they didn't really cover any topics when it came to Russia. But nonetheless, they said we're going to go balls to the wall over this situation, including sanctioning banks. So how is it that the ruble is stronger than ever? How is it that the ruble is stronger than ever? How is it that Russia and their economy is stronger than it's ever been, at least in modern history, and the entire world is experiencing rapid and rampant inflation, so food and supply shortages, natural gas shortages, oil prices are rising. Nobody know whose ally is who anymore. Why? How is that? You think that it took so long for Putin to invade Ukraine? I don't realize saying invade because he could just wipe Ukraine off the face of the planet and he didn't do it. Even though he made it very clear, like, yeah, we have the best hypersonic missile system in the world. And which was a flex because he told them, you know, when you tell people how much weapons you have and how much stronger you are than them, they're like, yeah, because we know you can't do anything about it. But they could have been gone to war with Ukraine. And he would have been justified in doing so. But he was like, can't do it yet. I'm sure he wanted to, but he couldn't do it. Why? We haven't lined up all of our ducks yet, people. Y'all knew that he had been stocking gold for like 10 years. He had been stocking gold for 10 years, something like more than 10 years, actually, in advance. Did y'all know that? Mm-hmm. So then, okay, they go to war. And he makes it clear. Yeah, and because y'all motherfuckers want to keep playing games, Western Europe is not cut off from our natural gas. And if you want to buy oil from us, you got to buy it in rubles. And guess what the motherfuckers did? They went right to that bank and they said, "Hey man, can I convert this USD into rubles? Can I convert these euros into rubles? I need some oil, guys." Then the US said, "Shit, man, just having NATO powers sanction Russia isn't going to work." Saudi Arabia, "Hey man, how you doing, dog? We got a call in a favor." Yeah, click. Beep. Saudi Arabia said, "No, y'all can kiss our ass. Y'all can kiss our ass." Hold on, what? Which probably means what? Putin had already been in contact with Saudi Arabia. He knew what was going to happen. Obviously, Iran, they're allies already, so he didn't have to worry about Iran. He was like, well, hold on. So Saudi Arabia and Iran, well, who else we going to call? Who else can you call? Every country that was not part of NATO that had previously been a reliable ally to the United States backed up. And they said, nope, this is your problem, not ours. Sorry. So that's what I'm saying. When I mean 4D chess, I mean Putin lined up every single angle to make sure that when we go to war with Ukraine, there is no other outcome than the one that we are seeing right now. And it is a very good chance, because I wasn't even thinking about it before. I was thinking like, yeah, he just wanted to deal with Ukraine. But when he says denazification, why do we believe that that denazification is actually limited to beating Ukraine? Why? Well, we know, once again, NATO was founded and put in, like, and the people that were put in charge of NATO were Nazis. Oh, man. Putin is a Libra. He moves like a Libra. You mean that whole fake thing where they act like they're super chill and we're super nice, and then they like try to cut your throat out type of Libra move? Yeah, that's Libra shit. Super personable, but also like we're planning your demise. Yeah, that's definitely some Libra shit. Sparky, thanks for the super chat. 1 quarter ahead, more like 10 minutes ahead. Yeah, you're right. It's exactly how they think. And so one of the benefits, what we also witnessed because of this interview, is the benefit of having a president. Whenever the United States was created, like most of the country, like most of the democracies around the world in most countries, there was no term limits. The reason why is because what international plan has an implementation window of 4 to 8 years? How many great relationships, well-established relationships, can you have in 4 to 8 years? Especially in the context of the US, where you have the turnover of Congress and the Senate so often. You can never actually establish your footing as a president of the United States when it comes to the international community. Right? This isn't the norm. People keep forgetting this. The United States is the exception, people. But people who are entrenched in this Western mindset, and specifically the mindset of the United States, they believe that if someone is in power for 15 or 20 years, it's because they're a dictator who is rigging elections. No, that's not the case. It means that 90% of the time, there's usually two factors involved. The people actually like the policies that president is passing, and also they stand up to the US and Western imperialism in general. And that's why they're in power still. They get voted in. Why would y'all, how many people here have a favorite food? How many people here have a favorite food? Y'all, there's a restaurant that is in Brazil, in Rio, called Spoleto. It's a pasta restaurant. Whenever, it's my go-to for everything. It's been my go-to for about a year and some change now. Okay? Some of y'all Chipotle people. I know they got a lot of Chipotle people right here. So Chipotle people here. When you like something, do you just decide one day, I don't like that shit no more? I think it's run its course. No, if you like the shit, you like the shit. If you like it, you like it. That's how democracies around the world generally tend to work, except for in the case of the United States and a couple of other countries. Him being able to serve for 20 years allowed him to play this long game that we saw on display, that we saw like a strategy guide on display last night during that interview. Because he's like, I know I have the history of how the US acted before I came into power. I have the history of how the US has behaved after I came into power. I tried to join NATO under Bill Clinton. Remember, Putin said that. I tried to join NATO under Bill Clinton. He had the leeway in the room to say, I can try to do it. So even if there was going to be negative backlash from this, he had the wiggle room to overcome that negative backlash because he knew that I don't really have term limits. So if it doesn't work out, but I need to know if this is genuinely an anti-Russia issue, or is it you don't believe that we are willing to engage in good faith with the West? So he found out that it is an anti-Russia issue. So he's able to now have the benefit of knowing, okay, this is how they're going to move. Bet. Too easy. He has the experiences of watching the CIA try to influence regions around the world because, it's Russia helping the Syrians against the terrorists that the US are propping up. He had the benefit to wait until relationships sour between the US and other proxies that they're using around the world. And then he can come in and help them out. That is why it's okay when someone's elected 15 or 20 years, especially in the case of a country that's going against Western imperialism. Because now I have the benefit of the bigger picture. When you have an 8-year, 4-year turnover like the US, you never get your footing. So, and I always make a point to mention, it was not a coincidence. Do y'all know when the 8 years started? It was after FDR. Because FDR got 3 terms. He didn't complete 3 terms, but he got 3 terms. Who was going to be the president until he was cheated at the convention, people? Who was going to be the president until he was cheated at the convention? It was Henry Wallace. Henry Wallace, who wanted to work with the Soviet Union to create a better world, a multipolar world. Henry Wallace, who wanted to desegregate the country. Henry Wallace, who wanted to pull the colonies out of Africa and work with developing nations so that they can benefit from the resources, and we could also benefit not through exploitation but through cooperation. Henry Wallace, who if took over, would have never invented the CIA, who would have never dropped the atomic bomb, who the Dulles brothers would have never been able to manipulate. I mean, the list literally goes on, right? So if, for example, Henry Wallace got the benefit of serving 1 term, 2 term, bro, could you imagine if Henry Wallace desegregated the entire country of the United States? And not to mention, um, probably a lot of a lot of the caveats, if you will, within the civil rights amendments, the caveats, they wouldn't have existed. They probably would have been genuine civil rights amendments. The Black Panthers never get labeled a terrorist organization. I mean, does Martin Luther King get assassinated? Does Malcolm X get assassinated? Hell, do we even have a necessity for those leaders? Are they even as important as they become? The truth is, if Henry Wallace is elected president or is allowed to take over as president after FDR dies, he would probably be in a lifetime term. And we wouldn't be living in the world we're living in today. That is why after FDR died, they made it a point to have, how is it that Dr. Fauci, of all people, can damn near have a lifetime appointment? Why is it that an unelected position like the Supreme Court can be a lifetime appointment? How is it the CIA director, technically speaking, can be a lifetime appointment? The FBI director, technically speaking, can be a lifetime appointment. U.S. attorneys, unelected, it's a political position, can be a lifetime appointment. Joint Chiefs of Staff, as long as they're in the military, and in the cases they're not, they're still even better because you're not ever going to retire. But those are also lifetime appointments if chosen to be that way. But the president of the United States of America, whose job effectively is to be the ambassador for the U.S. in the international community, why would that not be a lifetime appointment? Wouldn't you want those relationships to be maintained over long periods of time to ensure sustained success? There's been a concerted effort to try to convince you all that what we've seen with Putin, with Maduro, with Fidel Castro in his heyday, with Assad, with Gaddafi, there has been a concerted effort to convince you all that is because people like their leader enough for them to stay in power, that is a dictatorship. And they also try to convince you that, of course, we had to help overthrow this government. Why? Because the people didn't like them. Well, if the people didn't like them, why wouldn't they just vote them out? Well, they didn't let them. That's not true. You never even gave them a chance. And we saw what would happen in Bolivia, right? What they say? They didn't like Evo Morales. Well, why did his party have all the damn seats in Congress? And also, how did the person that he endorsed in his party win the moment they had another election, because they had one of the most secure elections in the world? We watched the master class. That's what we watched last night, if you watched it. And I'm going to be, over the course of the next couple of days, covering clips, because it was just, it really made you sad. It made me kind of like a little bit hopeful for the future. I'm like, damn, man, if this guy, whoever his successor is that supports him, is going to be one of the leaders of the multipolar world, we might have a chance. We might have a chance. American imperialism might not have a chance, but we, as the world, might have a chance, because there is somebody who is thinking ahead, who is playing 4D chess. And I believe that like there's people who actually believe that China is like the same as Putin and Xi Jinping. I don't believe that Xi Jinping and Putin are in the same mindset. I know that people think that. Uh, we can go into why later, but like I don't believe that China is the boogeyman that people claim they are. I also don't believe that Xi Jinping and China act as altruistically as people think they are either. They participated in the same hyper capitalism that most people criticize when they say they support Xi Jinping in China. And like no one really wants to acknowledge it. I believe that it would be foolish to not engage with them in bilateral economic relationships, but I also don't believe that Xi Jinping and Putin are the same people, like some people think they are. Right? I believe that there's just something about Putin that is constantly taking into account the benefit. He's Russia first, but he sees the bigger picture. And it isn't from a selfish perspective. China is very clear about their 200-year plan. They're not shy about it. Every move that China has made, including the engaging in hyper-capitalism while simultaneously pretending like they're communists, that's been for China. And there's nothing wrong. There's not necessarily from a statehood perspective, right? There's nothing necessarily wrong with that from their perspective. They're taking advantage of the dumbassity of the United States and their allies. It's smart, honestly. But I saw a person last night who understood and understands where we came from, where he came from, where Russia, his country came from. And he also understands where we're going. And he was very clear in drawing that line. This is not about, it's fucked up because many of the people of the US, the way they demonize all Russians, the way they demonize Putin, the way the vitriol they spew about Russian people, the tropes that they spew about Russian people, you would think that Putin would have every reason to be as vitriolic and be like, whatever y'all get, y'all fucking deserve. But that's not how he is. Because he understands. These people don't even know what they're talking about. They're propagandized, bro. They're propagandized. They don't know. Tucker don't know, really. He's like, they don't know. Y'all don't even know. Y'all leaders don't run the show. Y'all don't know anything about y'all country, which is crazy to say, but yeah. He understands, which is why Russia, there's a good chance, bro, that Russia ends up on top. Y'all want to hear before I get up out of here, y'all want to hear my prediction about Israel-Palestine? So let me answer the super chat real quick before I do my prediction. Sparky, denazify Israel, absolutely. Why was Russia not allowed to join NATO? Because the handlers said they couldn't. The U.S.'s handlers said they couldn't. And also, I mean, why does NATO even exist, right? Because NATO was specifically created to hinder the Soviet Union and to dissipate its existence. And then Soviet Union did everything that they asked and more. And yet they kept going balls to the wall to punish Russia. So I believe there will be an invasion of Israel within the next year. I believe there will be an invasion of Israel within the next year. The reason why. So when this whole situation with Russia and Ukraine popped off, Saudi Arabia took a back seat. We did not expect that to happen. I expected a little bit because I was fully aware that the whole Soleimani situation was specifically because Soleimani, representing Iran, was going to sit down with the royal family of Saudi Arabia. They were going to make a peace deal specifically involving oil. And obviously, Iran is allies with Russia economically, and so is Iraq, and so is Syria. So, shit, we're gonna sit this one out, homie. Good luck, guys. Okay. Iran, the U.S. is provoking Iran, and it's really on behalf, I think everybody knows this at this point, it's on behalf of Israel. Israel is also heating up and escalating with Lebanon. which is stupid. Israel's making a whole ass out of themselves in front of the entire world like they're desperate for something. It's like when a bulb burns bright as hell right before it burns the fuck out, right? Israel's playing its hand. They're also showing that their munitions are not unlimited. And to me, the question that has to be answered for a lot of people is, why did they make this dumbass decision when the US is on its way out when it comes to the amount of power they have over the rest of the world? Because they knew that the US is on its way out when it comes to the amount of power they have to leverage with the rest of the world. We have to take advantage of the fact that our big brother is still in charge, and we have to do it now, or otherwise this greater Israel concept will never happen, because we are aware of just how dire the situation is. Cool. So we have to take over Gaza now. We have to take over the West Bank completely now, or we may never get a chance to help to help achieve this goal of one Israel, of a greater Israel. So with that thought in mind, if Israel is fully aware of the decline in the US power, like Putin even said, the decline of the dollar is crazy right now. So now not only militarily does the US lack power, but the decline of the dollar is reducing their economic influence around the world. While simultaneously, by the way, Russia, who does not like Netanyahu, is rising in power. The ruble is rising in power. The yuan is rising in power. So now you got Iraq licking their lips. You got Iran. Please keep testing us. You got Lebanon waiting. You got the Houthis. The Houthis are single-handedly holding down the Red Sea against the empire. And they're finding out that they can do it. Oh, and by the way, while that's happening, did y'all know that Saudi Arabia and the Houthis, the Saudi Arabian-backed Yemeni government and the Houthis reached a peace deal that is going to expand over the next couple of years? Which means in any conflict with Israel, Saudi Arabia is out. At the bare minimum, just expect them not to participate. But if economic interests get involved, expect them to not be on Israel's side. The only countries that would technically be on Israel's side are the UAE sellout Arabs, but they don't really got militaries, do they? Once this situation with Russia and Ukraine gets completely resolved, and the US is, and Russia proves that NATO has no power to prevent shit from going down anymore. What are we witnessing in Africa, guys? Nigeria. Excuse me, not Nigeria, my apologies. Niger. What happened? Russia, NATO, the United States, ECOWAS, all those powers that usually would prevent those coups from happening, they just sat back, they talked all that shit, they huffed, they puffed, and they went back to their goddamn cave. And to this day, Niger still has their leader that they chose in power. There's a couple of countries that happened in. A few, actually. NATO doesn't have the power to stop shit, and this situation with Russia solidifies that. And Putin does not like Netanyahu. Netanyahu doesn't have the backing of his own people anymore. And when it comes down to it, they, unfortunately, could achieve what their definition of a victory in Gaza. They could achieve, theoretically, their definition of a victory in Gaza. Even if it's not completing the genocide, maybe it's something really close to it. They could achieve that theoretically. But whenever they think that they've achieved it, when they're celebrating, when they're exhausted, when they are exhausted because they're just like, oh, we're just so thankful we've gotten to this point. Because when I say just exhausted, they ain't going to be just exhausted from the war. It's exhaustion from the fact that Israel is currently protesting their own government. Their morale is done. They're completely hurt. They're done, bro. They can't hold out for like this much longer, but if they finally do hold out and they do achieve whatever goal that they have, guess what would be the perfect time to strike? Whenever Israel lets their foot off the gas. And Yemen has stopped the munitions for months and months from getting to Israel. And commercially, Israel is suffering. And politically, the morale is poor. And 30,000 people have left Israel just within the last few days. Hundreds of thousands left prior to that. Would you want your kid to go fight for the IDF right now? Do you even want them to go to birthright right now, knowing everything that's going on over there? Knowing how dangerous it is to be in Israel, not necessarily because of Hamas anymore, but because everybody in the world has their sights on you. Israel played their hand. Everything is on the table, and what people found out is, oh shit, yeah, y'all can barely handle Hamas, and y'all can kill a bunch of innocent women and children, but y'all can't really fight a war, can you? And the U.S. ain't really here to help you anymore. Not in any way that is like meaningful. Without sending more aid, the aid that's going to get through what? Not the Red Sea. And Saudi Arabia has already warned the U.S. to dial back trying to attack the Houthis in the Red Sea and attack Yemen in general. So, what do you think Lebanon's going to do? What do you think Iran's going to do? What do you think Iraq is going to do whenever Israel has let its guard down? Because they are all aware of the fact that the horrible policies that have been implemented in the Middle East are a result of who? Of Israel. And if Israel is taken out, y'all, the world would look completely different. And when we talk about denazification, know that that is not limited to Ukraine. That is an extension, as a policy extended, in my opinion, to NATO, obviously the United States, and also extended to Israel. I 100% believe that. When Putin says denazification, just have you not noticed he is not limited it to NATO? To Ukraine. He made sure to mention everyone who is allowing it to be propped up. All the allies of Ukraine, the United States, and NATO that have allowed this Nazification to be propped up. He was very, very specific. Israel is one of those allies. Do you think that Putin is not aware of how much control? If Putin is helping Syria all the time, if Putin has helped Iraq, if he's worked with Iran to help get terrorists out of the Middle East in these countries, and he made mention during the interview, why does the United States keep propping up terrorists? You think that he's not aware who's also been assisting in that effort that's propping up terrorists in the region? You think that he's not aware that Israel's participated? I'm just saying. And at the end of the day, who has the ability to supply their side while simultaneously the Houthis are cutting off the ability for the United States and their allies to supply their side, which would be Israel? All these Middle Eastern countries can get involved: Syria, Lebanon, Iran, Iraq. Hell, you might, depending on how the situation goes in Pakistan. Yeah, I know that Imran Khan was invaded or was overthrown, but that situation can flip on its head too. We don't know yet. But what we do know is that it just takes one country to get involved with a man who is on a mission, who is clearly demonstrated to me last night, and I believe that all of y'all would agree. He demonstrated to me that he sees what's going on. He can't always speak on it. He can't always point fingers, and he won't always name names, because if there is one guy who is proving his ability to play 4D chess, not superficially, not whatever the fuck social media has claimed 4D chess was to find excuses for the favorite politician. No. He plays 4D chess, and we've seen what check looks like. And y'all think he ain't already planning checkmate? And if he's planning checkmate, who is the king, or the queen rather, that he has to take out? Israel, at least in its current form. And even if he doesn't, you have to remember, guys, one of the reasons that Putin is kind of like, he doesn't talk a lot about Israel is because of how many Russian Israelis there are. How many Russian Zionists specifically, but how many Russian Israelis there are. The sentiment, the pro-Netanyahu sentiment is plummeting, people. It's plummeting. So he's getting a green light more and more and more. And his success in the Ukraine is boosting his stardom and his status amongst his people more than it already was. They know he knows what he's doing. So once shit hits the fan, the ICJ ruling it gives him a green light. The future rulings that we know are coming will give him a green light. The interviews from Israel themselves calling for genocide gives him a green light. A green light that he might not take right now, but he's aware that he can take it. And he knows that if he really wants a multipolar world where people cooperate bilaterally and Russia can stop sending its people to go to war and feeling the threat of the Western Empire, he knows he has to take out Israel in its current form. So I'm predicting within the year, there will be a major invasion of Israel. There will be something that we've never seen before that happens this year. Book it. It might start with Iran. I don't know if it'll start with Iran. It might start with Iran. Or it could be like Iranian militia by way of Lebanon. It could be Syria. Because as we're seeing the Houthis in Syria, the Houthis and the Saudi Arabian-backed government form peace, I would venture to say that Saudi Arabia would probably move on to making peace with Syria next. If that happens, that means Syria will be able to take its foot off the gas a little bit and focus its attention elsewhere. Yeah. I feel like Israel overplayed their hand. Honestly, I think it's it for them. Sparky, thanks for the super chat. Every time anyone says that Israel is our only friend in the Middle East, I can't help but think that before Israel, we had no enemies in the Middle East. U.S. missionary John Sheehan in the early 2000s. But it's funny because y'all know one of our allies in the Middle East before we overthrew their democratically elected government was Mossadegh, or was Iran, before we overthrew Mossadegh. So, thank you guys. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this live stream segment of Mikasa. Oh, no, not Mikasa, Tsukasa. We're For the People podcast now. Look at me. Thank you for tuning into this live stream podcast of For the People. Make sure you like this video. Make sure you share this video. Make sure that you subscribe if you have not. Make sure you have all notifications turned on YouTube if you have not, because a lot of people said that their notifications were turned off or they got them, it switched to personalized for some reason, but turn on all notifications. Make sure you subscribe to our Telegram channel so you can get all of our content, news and content updates. I'm going to put the Telegram channel in the chat for you guys right now so that y'all can subscribe straight from the live stream. Bong bong, right here. Support the show by becoming a patron on Patreon at patreon.com/Mikasa. You can also donate Bitcoin. You can donate through Cash App. You can donate through a various number of ways. You can obviously support us through super chats here on Rockfin. You can support us through tips or becoming a premium member there. Yeah, man, it was a great show. I'm going to be covering, like I said, a lot of Tucker's clips this week. That was like what groundbreaking interview, bro. The nuggets that we dropped, the logic that we saw. I really believe the implications going forward are going to be huge because we got to see the man that's effectively going to be the head of the most powerful country in the world next to China. I would say it's going to be them in China, but I believe that I don't know how long Xi Jinping's going to be in power. I know Putin ain't going nowhere anytime soon. Right? And you know what? I'm here for it, guys. I'm here for it. I'm ready for a multipolar world and multipolar relationships. I'm ready for us to do some bilateral negotiation and for people to get a fair opportunity to maximize the potential of their country with their resources for the benefit of their people. I think that they deserve it. I think that's where we need to support anyone who is allowing that reality to come into fruition. With that being said, people, always remember more than anything else, find your balance. Peace.